Let us begin with a strange fact. If the sun vanished this very second, you would not know for 8 minutes. Not the light, not the warmth, not even the pull of its gravity. For 8 minutes and 20 seconds, everything would carry on exactly as before. The sun would already be gone, and the sky would still be blue, and the earth would still be swinging along its orbit as though nothing had happened, because the news of the sun's disappearance simply would not have reached us yet. That is one of the deepest facts in all of physics, hidden inside a question that sounds like a children's riddle. What would happen if the sun disappeared? And the honest answer takes us through the speed of light, the nature of gravity, the way the earth holds its heat, and the surprising possibility that life would not end at all, but would simply move, quietly, into the dark. Tonight we are going to work through the whole thing slowly and gently, from that first untroubled 8 minutes all the way to the frozen centuries that follow, and I promise, as always, to end by explaining why none of it can actually happen and to leave you warm and safe exactly where you are. But before we go a step further, let me ask you something, softly, because it matters more than you might think. If these quiet journeys through the strange corners of our universe help you set down the weight of your day and find your way toward rest, then please, take just a moment right now before you settle any deeper into the warm and subscribe. It is one small tap. But it means the next of these will find its way back to you on some future restless night when sleep is a long way off and you need somewhere gentle to put your mind. And it helps, more than you could possibly know, to keep these stories being made for you and for everybody else out there in the dark tonight looking for a little peace. So if you would, subscribe and stay with me, night after night, as we wander together through the great slow mysteries of the universe. And tell me, if you will, from wherever you happen to be resting tonight, in whatever quiet corner of the world is holding you, where are you listening from? And what hour has it reached where you are? Leave it in the comments below. It is a lovely thing to see all the places and all the hours gathered there together, all of us drifting off beneath the same turning sky, in 100 different countries and 100 different hours, all of us here in the dark at once. And now, let your shoulders come down, and let your breathing slow, and let the whole weight of your day loosen and fall away. Come with me out to the center of everything, to the ordinary yellow star that all of this turns around, and let us imagine, for one evening only, that it simply is not there. Let us begin with the 8 minutes, because they are the strangest and most beautiful part of the whole scenario, and they teach you something true about the universe. The sun is about 150 million kilometers away. That is an enormous distance, and light, for all its speed, does not cross it instantly. Light travels at about 300,000 kilometers every second, which is fast beyond any ordinary meaning of the word. And even so, it takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to make the journey from the sun to your eyes. It is hard to feel how fast light really is. So let me try to give you a sense of it. A beam of light could go all the way around the Earth about 7.5 times in a single second. It crosses from one side of our planet to the other in the blink of an eye, far faster than any thought. Nothing in the universe travels faster. It is the absolute speed limit of reality, the fastest anything can possibly go. And even at that speed, even moving quickly enough to circle the Earth 7 times while you say the word once, light still needs more than 8 minutes to reach us from the sun. That should tell you something about how far away the sun actually is. It feels close, it fills the sky, it warms your face, it dominates the day, and it is so distant that the fastest thing in existence takes 8 minutes to arrive from it, which means something quite profound and worth sitting with. You have never once seen the sun as it is. You have only ever seen the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. The sunlight falling on your window this afternoon left the sun before you had finished whatever you were doing 8 minutes earlier. The sun you see at any moment is always a sun from the recent past. So if the sun were to vanish completely in an instant, the last light it ever emitted would already be on its way. That light would keep traveling, because light does not need its source to continue existing once it has set out. And for 8 minutes and 20 seconds, that final wave of sunlight would keep arriving, and the sun would appear to shine perfectly normally from a place where there was no longer anything at all. Rest a moment on that image, because it is one of the eeriest in all of astronomy. A sun that is already gone, still hanging in the sky, still bright, still warm, for the length of time it might take to make a cup of tea. Everyone going about their afternoon, birds singing, the light perfectly ordinary, and nothing there. And this is not a special property of the sun. It is true of everything you have ever seen in the sky. When you look at the moon, you see it as it was a little over a second ago. When you look at the nearest planets, you are seeing them as they were minutes or hours ago. When you look at the nearest star beyond the sun, you are seeing light that left it more than 4 years ago, and the star could, in principle, have ceased to exist at any point in those 4 years, and you would have no way of knowing yet. And the further out you look, the deeper into the past you see. The light from the more distant stars in the night sky left them centuries or thousands of years ago. Some of the faint smudges you can see on a very dark night are other galaxies, and their light has been traveling for millions of years to reach you. You are not seeing the sky. You are seeing a vast layered record of the past, all arriving at once, the nearby things recent and the distant things ancient, all mixed together into what looks like a single moment. The night sky is the least up-to-date thing there is. Nothing in it is now, it is all then, and the bigger the distance, the deeper the then. So the sun being 8 minutes old is simply the nearest and gentlest example of a rule that governs the entire universe. Nothing far away is ever seen as it is, only as it was. But here is the part that surprises almost everybody, and it is the deepest thing in tonight's question. The gravity would also keep reaching us for those same 8 minutes. For a long time, people assumed that gravity acted instantly, that if you moved a mass, its pull would be felt everywhere at once, with no delay across any distance. The old theory of gravity, the one that served us beautifully for 2 centuries, was built that way, with the pull acting instantaneously across empty space. But that turned out to be wrong. Gravity is not instant. When our understanding of gravity was rebuilt a little over a century ago, one of its firm predictions was that changes in gravity travel at exactly the speed of light, not faster, the same speed as everything else. And this is not merely a theoretical claim, it has been measured. A few years ago, 2 enormous instruments detected the ripples in space produced by 2 black holes colliding more than 1 billion light-years away. And in one remarkable case, a collision of 2 dense stars was detected both in gravitational waves and in light from the same event. The 2 signals, the tremor in space and the flash of light, having traveled side by side for over 100 million years, arrived at the Earth within about 2 seconds of each other, which means gravity and light travel at the same speed to an extraordinary precision, confirmed across more than 100 million years of travel. The prediction made a century ago on paper turned out to be exactly right. Gravity is not instant. It moves at the speed of light, the same as everything else, and not 1 bit faster, which means that if the sun vanished, the Earth would not fly off its orbit immediately. It would keep circling the empty point where the sun used to be, held by a gravity that was no longer being produced, for the same 8 minutes and 20 seconds, until the last of the sun's gravitational influence had finished crossing the gap. So for those 8 minutes, the Earth would continue in its curved path, faithfully orbiting nothing, lit by a sun that was not there. Light and gravity, both still arriving, both from a source that had ceased to exist. The whole solar system for those few minutes would be a kind of ghost, moving to the pull of something already gone. And it would not only be the Earth. Every planet would carry on in its orbit for as long as it took the news to reach it. The innermost planet, closer to the sun, would fly off first, after only a few minutes, the Earth after 8. The outer planets would continue faithfully circling an absence for hours, the most distant of them coasting along its curve for something like 4 hours after the sun had gone, still turning a corner that was no longer there because the last of the sun's gravity was still on its way across the enormous gulf. For those hours, the solar system would come apart in slow motion, from the inside out, each world flying off on its own straight line the moment the pull finally failed, like a set of dancers releasing hands one by one as the music stops, starting from the center and spreading outward. And no one on any of them, if there were anyone, could possibly have known it was happening until the moment it reached them, because there is no way for the information to travel faster than the gravity itself. And then, at 8 minutes and 20 seconds, both would end at once for us. The light would cut off, and in the very same instant, The Earth would feel the last of the pull vanish, and it would stop curving. And here is what it would do. It would not fall inward, because there would be nothing to fall toward. It would not be flung outward. It would simply, suddenly travel in a straight line, because that is what orbiting really is. An orbit is not a circle that something is stuck in. It is a straight line, constantly bent by gravity into a curve. Take the gravity away, and there is nothing left to do the bending, and the Earth continues in whatever direction it happened to be moving at that instant, in a perfectly straight line, out into the dark, at the speed it always had, which is about 30 kilometers every second. It would not feel like anything. There would be no lurch, no jolt. The Earth would just stop turning the corner it had been turning for 4.5 billion years, and go straight on, off on a tangent, into the emptiness between the stars, leaving the orbit behind like a train leaving a curve of track and running off across open country. Rest a moment there and let that settle, because it is one of the loveliest reframings in physics. We think of orbits as a kind of trap, a groove that the planets are caught in. They are not. Every planet right now is trying to travel in a straight line and is only prevented by the constant gentle bending of the sun's gravity. The circle is not the natural motion. The straight line is. The sun is quietly turning that straight line into a loop over and over forever. And where would that straight line take us? Out, simply out, into the enormous dark between the stars, at 30 kilometers a second, which sounds fast and is achingly slow against the distances involved. At that speed, it would take tens of thousands of years to reach even the nearest star, and we would not be heading toward it in any case. We would be heading in whatever direction the Earth happened to be traveling at the instant the pull vanished, off across the empty spaces, on a path that leads, essentially, nowhere, forever. The Earth would become a rogue planet, a world without a star. And there are a great many of those, as it turns out, worlds flung out of their systems or born without a sun in the first place, drifting alone through the galaxy in the dark. Some estimates suggest they may be as numerous as the stars themselves, perhaps more. The dark between the stars is not empty. It is quite possibly full of silent, sunless, wandering worlds, and the Earth would simply become one more of them. So 8 minutes of ghostly normality, and then darkness, and the Earth set loose to fly straight out into the night. That is the beginning. Now let us follow what happens next, because it is slower and gentler than most people imagine. The first thing everybody asks is about the cold, and the surprising answer is that it would not come nearly as fast as you would think. You might expect the world to freeze solid within hours. It would not. The Earth is an enormous object and it is warm, and warmth takes a long time to leave something that large. On the day it happened, for the half of the world already in night, nothing would seem wrong at all at first. And for the half in daylight, the sun would simply go out, and the sky would fill with stars in the middle of the afternoon, and it would become as dark as a moonless night everywhere at once. But the temperature at first would barely move. The ground holds heat. The oceans hold an enormous amount of heat, far more than the land, and they release it slowly. The air holds heat. All of that stored warmth would begin to leak away into space, but slowly, over days and weeks, not hours. Within the first week, the average temperature around the world would fall to something like the depth of a hard winter, unpleasant and dangerous in the open, but nothing that the warm clothes already in your cupboard could not handle for a while. Within the first year, the average surface temperature would be far below freezing everywhere on the planet, colder than the coldest place on Earth today. The surface of the oceans would begin to freeze. Let me lay that timeline out a little more carefully, because the stages are interesting and the pace is slower than instinct suggests. The very first thing to go within days would be the plants, not because of the cold at first, but because of the dark. Photosynthesis would stop almost immediately, and the whole green base of life on the surface would begin to fail. Most plants would take weeks or months to actually die, and large trees would stand for a very long time, but the foundation of nearly every food chain on land and in the sunlit surface waters would have been removed within the first week. The temperature would lag behind, held up by all that stored heat. Coastal places, near the vast warmth of the oceans, would stay milder for far longer than the centers of continents, where the cold would bite first and hardest. For a while, Being near the sea would be a real advantage. After a week, a hard winter everywhere. After a month, the coldest winter ever recorded, everywhere, all at once. After a year, far below anything in human experience. After a decade, the surface would have settled towards something like -100, and the ice on the oceans would be thickening steadily. But the fall would not go on forever. It would slow and eventually stop, because the heat rising from the Earth's own interior would come into balance with the heat radiating away into space. That balance point is extremely cold, well over 200 degrees below zero at the surface, but it is a floor. The world would reach it after a long time and then get no colder. And now we come to the single most important and most hopeful fact in this entire scenario, and it turns on a strange property of water. The oceans would not freeze solid. Not for a very, very long time. Almost every substance, when it freezes, becomes denser, so the solid sinks. Water is one of the rare exceptions. Ice is less dense than liquid water. Ice floats. This seems like a small curiosity, and it is one of the most important facts about our planet, because it means that when the surface of the ocean freezes, the ice stays on top and forms a lid. And ice is a fairly good insulator. So the water underneath is shielded from the cold above, and it loses its heat only very slowly through that growing barrier of ice. It is worth pausing on how unusual that is and how much depends on it. Water is one of a very small number of substances that expand when they freeze. In almost everything else, the solid form is denser and sinks. If water behaved the ordinary way, then as a pond or a lake or an ocean cooled, the ice would form and immediately sink to the bottom, and more ice would form on the newly exposed surface and sink in turn, and the whole body of water would freeze solid from the bottom up, with nothing to stop it. On a world like that, a hard enough winter would kill every lake and every sea completely, all the way through, and everything in them. And in the scenario we are imagining tonight, the disappearance of the sun would freeze every ocean on Earth into a solid block, and that would truly be the end. But water does not do that. It freezes from the top and floats and insulates and protects the depths. Fish survive winter under the ice of a frozen lake because of this single strange property. And in a sunless world, the same property is what would keep the great deep oceans liquid and the vents flowing, and the dark life alive, for an extraordinarily long time. If water froze from the bottom up like almost everything else, the oceans would freeze solid and every living thing in them would die. Because it freezes from the top down and then insulates itself, the depths stay liquid. So over the years and centuries after the sun vanished, a thick shell of ice would form over all the oceans, growing slowly downward, perhaps to tens or hundreds of meters in thickness. But beneath that ice, the water would remain liquid, dark and cold and still, warmed from below. Warmed from below by what? By the Earth itself. And this is the second hopeful fact. The sun is not the Earth's only source of heat. The interior of our planet is hot, extremely hot, and that heat has nothing to do with the sun. It comes partly from the leftover warmth of the planet's violent formation, and mostly from the slow decay of radioactive elements buried in the rock, a process that has been quietly generating heat for 4.5 billion years and will continue for billions more. That heat flows constantly up through the rock and out through the ocean floor. It drives the volcanoes and moves the continents, and crucially, it would keep the deep oceans from ever freezing completely. So the picture, after some centuries, is not a dead ball of ice. It is a world with a thick frozen crust, and beneath it a dark liquid ocean, kept from freezing by the heat of the planet's own interior, going around and around, or rather now flying straight on through the dark. And there are things living in that dark ocean, right now, tonight, that would not even notice the sun was gone. At the bottom of the sea, far below any sunlight even today, there are places where hot, mineral-rich water rises up through cracks in the ocean floor, heated by the Earth's interior. And around those places, in complete and permanent darkness, there are entire thriving communities of living things. Not a few hardy survivors, whole ecosystems, great fields of tube worms and crabs and shrimp, and clams and mats of bacteria, all living in the pitch black thousands of meters down. And here is the crucial thing. None of it uses sunlight. The base of that entire food web is not photosynthesis, but chemistry. There are bacteria that draw their energy directly from the chemicals dissolved in the vent water, and everything else feeds on them or on each other. It is life built on the heat of the earth, not the light of the sun. When those communities were first discovered a few decades ago, they overturned something people had believed for a very long time. It had been more or less assumed that all life, everywhere, ultimately ran on sunlight, that the sun was the single source of energy for the living world, and that everything directly or indirectly ate light. Plants caught it, animals ate the plants, other animals ate those, and even the creatures of the deep sea were living, in the end, on scraps of material that drifted down from the sunlit surface far above. And then submersibles went down to the vents and found dense, thriving, complicated life in a place where not a single photon of sunlight had ever reached, running entirely on chemical energy welling up from inside the earth. It was one of the truly surprising biological discoveries of the last century, and it changed how people think about where life can exist, both on this planet and on others. Those communities would carry on. The sun going out would make no difference to them at all. The vents would keep flowing, the bacteria would keep feeding on the chemicals. The tube worms would keep growing in the dark, exactly as they have for as long as there have been oceans. And there is more. Deep inside the rock of the earth itself, kilometers down in the tiny pores and cracks of the crust, there is an enormous amount of microbial life. Some estimates suggest that a substantial fraction of all the living matter on this planet is down there in the deep rock, in the dark, living unimaginably slowly, feeding on chemistry, entirely independent of the surface and the sun. And when I say slowly, I mean at a pace that is hard to comprehend. Some of these deep microbes are thought to divide perhaps once a century, or even less often. Some individual cells may be thousands of years old. They live in a world with no seasons, no day and no night, no events, at a temperature and a pressure that never change, doing almost nothing for spans of time that dwarf entire human civilizations. To such an organism, the disappearance of the sun would be not merely survivable, but literally imperceptible. It would register nothing. It would carry on dividing once a century in the warm, dark rock, as it has since long before there were forests or animals or anyone to look up at the sky, indifferent to whether that sky held a sun or not. All of that would continue too, completely unaffected. Rest a moment on that, because I find it one of the most quietly reassuring facts I know about our world. If the sun went out, it would be a catastrophe beyond anything in the history of life, and everything on the surface would perish, and that is not a small thing. But life itself would not end. Down in the dark, in the vents and the deep rock, a vast quantity of living material would carry on exactly as before, feeding on the warmth of the earth, in the black, as though nothing at all had happened. Life on this planet very likely began in the dark, around vents like those, long before anything learned to use sunlight. If the sun vanished, life would simply return to where it started, and wait. And that is worth sitting with, because it turns the whole picture around. We tend to imagine the sun as the giver of life, the thing without which nothing could exist. And in a sense, that is true for almost everything you have ever seen. Every animal, every plant, every bird and fish and tree, nearly the entire visible living world runs on sunlight in the end. But that living world may be the recent, fragile, sunlit surface layer of something much older and much deeper. Life on Earth is thought to be nearly 4 billion years old, and for a great deal of that history, it may have been overwhelmingly a thing of the dark, of the vents and the deep rock, running on the Earth's own heat. Photosynthesis, the trick of eating sunlight, came later. It was an innovation, a new way of living that opened up the bright surface of the world. And it was enormously successful, and it transformed the planet, and it is what we, and almost everything we know, are built on. But it was not the beginning, and it might not be strictly necessary. The older, deeper, darker way of living was there first, and it would still be there at the end. If the sun went out, the surface world would fall silent, and the ancient dark world beneath would simply carry on as it always had, warm and slow and patient, in no particular hurry. as though the whole bright sunlit chapter had been a brief and lovely interruption that was now over. And what about people? It is the question everyone reaches for, so let me answer it honestly, because it is not as hopeless as you might think, though it is very hard. The surface would become uninhabitable quite quickly. Within months, growing food outdoors would be impossible anywhere. Within a year or two, simply being outside would be lethal without heavy protection everywhere on Earth. But there is a source of warmth that has nothing to do with the sun, and we already know how to use it. In many places on this planet, heat rises close enough to the surface that hot water and steam come up naturally, and several countries already heat entire cities and generate much of their electricity from it. That heat is the Earth's own, and it would not diminish in the slightest. So the plausible picture is not extinction, but a drastic retreat. Communities gathered around volcanic and geothermal regions, living underground or under heavy insulation, growing food under artificial light powered by the Earth's heat, recycling air and water with enormous care. It would be small and precarious and utterly dependent on technology and cooperation, but the raw energy would be there, flowing up from below for billions of years, whatever the sky was doing. Whether such a thing could actually hold together is a question about people rather than physics, and physics is the only part I would want to be confident about. But the planet would not deny us the heat. The Earth is warm inside and it stays warm on its own. Now let us deal with the air, because there is a strange and beautiful detail here that people rarely hear. As the temperature fell over the years, the gases of the atmosphere would begin to freeze one after another, each at its own temperature, in order. First the water vapor would go, condensing out and falling as the last rains, and then as snow. Then, as it grew colder still, the carbon dioxide would freeze. It does not become a liquid at normal pressure. It goes straight from gas to solid, and it would fall out of the sky as a fine, dry snow, settling over the frozen landscape. And then, if it grew cold enough, and stayed cold enough for long enough, the main body of the air itself would begin to give up. Oxygen freezes at around 218 degrees below zero. Nitrogen, which makes up most of what you are breathing right now, freezes at around 210 below. So the end point, after a very long time, thousands of years, would be a world whose atmosphere had frozen and fallen to the ground. The sky would empty. The air would come down and lie over the frozen oceans as a layer of nitrogen and oxygen snow, meters deep. There is something almost gentle about that final image when you sit with it. No violence in it at all. The air over thousands of quiet years, simply settling out of an empty black sky, flake by flake, and coming to rest as a soft, deep layer of frost over everything, in a silence more complete than anywhere on Earth has ever known. A snow made of the sky itself, falling on a world that no longer has any weather to disturb it. That is a strange and desolate image, a planet with its own atmosphere lying on its surface as frost, and yet beneath it the deep ocean would still be liquid, and the vents would still be flowing, and the life around them would still be there, in the dark, warm and unbothered, kilometers below the frozen sky. Rest a moment on that contrast, because it is worth holding gently. A dead white surface under a black and empty sky, and far beneath it, warm, dark water full of quiet living things that never needed the sun. The world would not be lifeless. It would simply have moved everything that mattered underground and closed the lid. And here is something that ties it all together. This is not a fantasy. There are worlds in our own solar system right now that are almost exactly like this. Out among the great outer planets, far from the sun, receiving barely any light or warmth from it, there are moons with exactly this arrangement. A thick shell of ice on the outside, and beneath it, a global ocean of liquid salt water, kept liquid not by the sun, but by heat generated within. One of them is believed to hold more liquid water beneath its ice than all the oceans of the Earth combined. Another has been seen venting plumes of water into space through cracks near its pole, and spacecraft have flown through those plumes and found salts and organic molecules and signs of hot water reacting with rock on the ocean floor, which is to say, signs of exactly the kind of chemistry that supports life in the dark down here. Think about what that means for a moment. These moons receive almost no warmth from the sun. They are so far out that the sun, from their surface, is little more than an unusually bright star, giving essentially no heat. By the logic that says life needs sunlight, they should be dead frozen rocks all the way through. And instead, they are among the most interesting places in the solar system, precisely because they have liquid water oceans, kept liquid by internal heat in permanent darkness under ice. In some cases, the heat comes from radioactive decay, as on Earth. In others, it comes from the constant flexing of the Moon as it is pulled about by the gravity of its giant parent planet, a process that generates warmth deep inside from nothing but tidal squeezing. The point is that they have found a way to be warm without the sun, and they are not rare. There appear to be several such worlds in our own solar system alone. If our system, which is nothing special, contains several ocean worlds hidden under ice, then the galaxy must contain an enormous number of them. These frozen, sunless, ocean-bearing moons are, at this moment, among the most promising places in the entire solar system to look for life beyond the Earth. Not the sunlit worlds, the dark ones, with warm oceans hidden under ice. So, a sunless Earth would not be an oddity. It would simply have joined a category of world that is already common, and that may turn out to be one of the more usual places for life to exist in the universe. We think of the sunlit surface as the normal home for life. It may be the rare and fragile exception, and the dark ocean under ice may be the ordinary case. Now, before we finish, let me tell you why none of this can happen, because that part is truly reassuring, and it is important. The sun cannot disappear, not unlikely to. Cannot. There is no process in physics that removes a star. Nothing makes 150 million tons of hydrogen and helium simply cease to exist. Mass and energy are conserved. They do not vanish. The sun is not going anywhere. This is one of the most solidly established principles in all of science. Matter and energy can change form endlessly. The sun does it constantly, turning a little of its mass into light every second, which is where all its energy comes from. But the total never simply disappears. There is no known process, anywhere in physics, by which a large amount of matter blinks out of existence and leaves nothing behind. The scenario we have been imagining tonight is not merely unlikely. It is not a thing that the laws of the universe permit at all. The sun does have a future, and it is well understood. And it involves nothing of the sort. It has been shining steadily for about 4.5 billion years, and it is a stable, ordinary, middle-aged star, and it will go on shining, almost exactly as it does now, for around another 5 billion years. After that, slowly, over further billions of years, it will run low on fuel in its core and swell into a red giant, growing large and cool and red, large enough perhaps to swallow the innermost planets, and then it will gently shed its outer layers into space, leaving behind its hot, exposed core an Earth-sized ember called a white dwarf, which will cool slowly over an almost unimaginable stretch of time. And notice how gentle even that is, compared to the abrupt disappearance we imagined tonight. The sun's real ending is not sudden at all. It is a slow swelling and a slow fading, spread across billions of years, so gradual that on any human timescale, or even on the timescale of an entire civilization, nothing would seem to be happening at all. Nobody watching the sun on any single day, or in any single lifetime, or across any span of recorded history, would be able to see it change. It is one of the steadiest things in the universe, and its eventual death is so far off and so slow that it barely deserves the word death. That is the sun's actual fate. It is very gradual, it is very far away, and it is not a disappearance. There is no version of the future in which the sun blinks out. The scenario we have spent tonight exploring is purely a thought experiment, a way of understanding the speed of light and the nature of gravity and the hidden warmth of our own planet by imagining something that will never occur. And that is worth holding on to as we come back. The 8 minutes, the straight line into the dark, the freezing oceans, the frozen air, none of it is a forecast. It is a story we tell in order to understand how the world actually works. And the thing it reveals more than anything is how steady and reliable your real situation is. The sun rose this morning, as it has every morning for 4.5 billion years. And it will rise tomorrow, and it will keep rising every single morning for longer than you can meaningfully imagine. So let us come back now, gently, and put the whole thing down. The sun is exactly where it has always been. It is not going anywhere. It is on the far side of the world at this moment, doing precisely what it has done without fail since long before there was anyone here to be glad of it, and it is already on its way around to your side, to arrive at your window in the morning, unremarkable and faithful and warm. There is nothing to fear in tonight's question, and a great deal to find beautiful in it. That light takes 8 minutes to reach us, so the sun you see is always a gift from the recent past. That gravity travels at the same gentle pace, so even the pull that holds you is arriving from a moment ago. That your planet is warm all the way through, with its own hidden heat quite independent of the sky. And that life, if it ever had to, could retreat into the warm dark and wait, because that is where it came from. None of these are frightening things. They are the quiet machinery of a very old and very stable world, and you are held safely in the middle of it. And there is something worth keeping from all of it, I think, past tonight. The most reassuring discovery in this whole scenario was not about the sun at all. It was about the earth. That underneath us, all the time, there is a source of warmth entirely our own, that owes nothing to the sky, and that has been burning quietly for 4.5 billion years and will burn for billions more. We tend to think of this planet as a thing that is lit and warmed from outside by the sun, and mostly it is. But it also has a fire of its own, deep down, that no darkness could ever put out. You are lying on a warm world in every sense. Warm from above, by the sun, which is not going anywhere. And warm from below, by the earth itself, which never stops. There is heat on both sides of you, and there always has been your whole life, and you have never had to think about either. So let your breathing slow, and let the empty sky and the straight line into the dark and the frozen oceans all drift away, out past the roof and the clouds, into the realm of things that make interesting stories and never actually happen. You are on a warm world, lit by a steady star, in an orbit that has held for 4.5 billion years and will hold for billions more. Nothing is vanishing. Nothing is going out. The floor is holding you, the air is staying where it is, and the sun is coming back in the morning, exactly as it always has. Sleep now. The sun is not going anywhere. It has shone faithfully over every night there has ever been, and it will be there, warm and ordinary and exactly on time, when the morning comes. There is nothing to watch for and nothing to guard against, and you can let the whole sky look after itself tonight and simply rest.